Hello everyone! I'm excited to welcome you to Live Healthy Naturally, where we flip the dialogue about health and wellness in terms of what your body can do on its own and your ability to heal from many so-called lifelong diseases. I'm your host, Dr. Samya Sridharan. I'm a naturopathic doctor practicing out of Dallas, Texas. And I'm also the founder of Homeopathy and Holistic Retreat. Are you ready to hear the stories of healing and the many journeys of people's healing from autism, autoimmune conditions, and many more? Then listen on. Hello, Saraspathy.
Hi there again, Soumya.
Thank you for joining me again to share your son's story about his enlarged tonsils and allergies. I wanted to invite you back here because that's another one that has been a lot of kids actually suffer from. A lot of kids also deal with other consequences of that problem. So I wanted to invite you back here to talk about that and help our listeners understand that even these kinds of things can be healed and surgery is not your only option. So thank you for coming back.
My pleasure. It's always great to, be here and share our stories because it's a great story. The
Yes.
healing obviously is a great story. So
Yes.
I'm glad to be here.
So if you have not heard Saraswati's story of healing, then I really encourage my listeners to go back and listen to our first episode. That was her story. And today she's here to share her son's story. So we won't go back to all of the entire history as well, all over again, just so we can spare our listeners same things. Saraswati's story is also a fantastic story of healing from thyroid disease and also hives, allergic reactions. So I would highly encourage you to go back and, to the first episode and listen to that. First episode of the interviews, not the first episode of our podcast, just so I'm clear. And that would be a fantastic one to listen to as well, because allergies are so common. And in terms of urticaria, things that are like allergic reactions on the skin is so much common nowadays as well. And we see so many patients with those things and how you can heal too if you have something like that and you don't have to live with them. That's something that I want to tell you. And one more thing that I would also like to point out too that has been interesting is I've been noticing this pattern of people with thyroid issues also having urticaria.
That's interesting.
Yes. And that's not something that we covered in our podcast in your interview last time. So that's why I wanted to mention that as well. And it's been interesting because I have quite a bit of people with hypothyroidism that I treat, as well as urticaria. And then a lot of them come to me with urticaria, or allergic reaction. And they don't necessarily think that they're coming in for treatment for also hypothyroidism. But then, in their history, I'll also see that they have hypothyroidism. And it's been an interesting thing. I really didn't necessarily see the connection before or think that there was a connection before. But of course, every skin condition is really the result of the gut. And if you have heard my other interviews or the podcast itself, you would know that the gut is literally the beginning and end of pretty much everything. And the more we actually focus on our gut, the better our health will be. And the less we focus on it, the less we take care of it, the worse our health will be. So, Saraswati, so tell me what was going on with your son before you started on this healing journey for him?
Sure. I guess I'm kind of quite grateful for all of that because otherwise I wouldn't have found you. So we moved to Dallas in 2014. From Bloomington near Chicago in Illinois. So it was a pretty, I guess, weather change for him. He was about just over a year old. But he stayed home for, because my parents were here, he pretty much stayed home till the end of the year. So he was okay at that time. Of course, we were using dairy and other things at that time. We were not vegan. But I went to India and I came back and then he started going to the daycare. And the day he started, I guess from the next day onwards, he started having running nose and he was like kind of pretty heavy, like breathing in terms of breathing. He was pretty heavily breathing. And I mean, I didn't know all these things at that time. I just thought, he was getting allergies because it's Dallas, and people said that, Dallas has a lot of allergies, and that's how he got reacted. So I just kind of kept taking to a regular pediatrician, and, they would like, sometimes they said he was wheezing, so they'd do that nebulizer treatment and all of that. And there was one time they called him asthmatic.
Okay.
And that broke my heart. He
Mm.
was not even like 2 years old, and people are calling him asthmatic. And I mean, coming from India, where I've seen like old people like having asthma attacks, where they're coughing and they're having trouble breathing. It was, I mean, heartbreaking for me to see a 2-year-old, like less than 2 years old, to actually go through that. And I was
Right.
like, there should be something else. I mean, there should obviously be something else that can help him not become like an asthmatic person, and it's not right. I mean, I just didn't feel right going to a regular pediatrician. So
So did you also, at that point in time when he was getting sick often, since he started going to the daycare, was he
mhm.
also given medications for that? Like, was he given antibiotics? Was he given, antihistamines? What was other things that he was given before he was diagnosed with asthma?
So when he had fever or anything like that, they did give him antibiotics, like
Mm-hmm.
amoxicillin or whatever the antibiotic was. And but when he had this wheezing and all of that, they gave him like Flonase or
Uh-huh.
those nasal sprays, I
Right.
believe, for the
Asthma
allergies.
nebulizer. Okay.
Yeah, and Claritin and all that other. I don't even remember the names anymore because
Right.
it's been so long since I went to that aisle in any store in town.
And it's
So
wonderful
I
that you don't really have to remember all of those things anymore because you
absolutely,
don't need those things anymore. But I do want to
absolutely.
interject here and
Mm,
share this with our listeners because so many times this happens to so many children. And that's also the reason why I invited you to share this story because so many children start off like very young. Their parents have a pediatrician and they take the child to the pediatrician from the get-go because they want to make sure that their child is well taken care of, is healthy,
mhm.
healthier than even them, possibly. And
Right.
so that's the reason why they start going there. But then the child actually gets sick and they get number of vaccines as well to prevent infections. But then they get other infections. They get, runny noses,
Mhm.
they get ear infections, they get strep throats. They get all of these different infections and they are medicated. They are given antibiotics from very young. And if you've heard
Mhm.
my podcast before, or if you didn't, you should go back and listen to all the other episodes because it's very important, is how important our gut flora is, how important our gut health is. And when the gut health is destroyed by the use of these antibiotics, it takes 2 years after one course of antibiotic for it to
Mhm.
build the flora back again. For the body to bounce back, it takes 2 years after
Wow.
one course of antibiotic. And I really, really want to reiterate this so strongly because so many children are getting way too many antibiotics than they need. It's
Yeah.
not like life-threatening illnesses. There are so many natural alternatives available to you. And
Mhm.
I even direct you to go to our website if you don't know anything about it. And there are free resources in there. And I encourage you to listen to it, see it. There are protocols there that you can use to treat your children at home first and become the master of treating acute illnesses at home. And even I have my naturopathic medicine course for mothers and fathers, really, to try and treat most things at home by themselves for their children as well as their entire family. So I give these resources and encourage people to do this because we could really prevent so many of the things that Saraswati had to endure with her child if
Yeah.
we knew better. If we know better and do things better early on, we don't have to go through all of these things that she did. So when the child was given antibiotics, what it does is it actually destroys the gut flora. And not only does it destroy the gut flora, but another thing that it also does is it actually paves way for fungus and other things that is not necessary for it to be in the gut to grow and flourish. And then
Mm.
they produce toxic metabolites that get out of the gut and into the blood. And now the immune system starts reacting to it by producing histamine. And that's what comes up as either nasal allergies or it comes up as respiratory issues, asthma, and so on and so forth. And
Right.
without looking at that aspect of it at all, what is done more is antihistamines. And antihistamines like Zyrtec, Claritin, all of these things, yes, they quench the histamine, but they don't really do anything.
Histamine.
They don't really do anything to the production of histamine that's coming from the gut. So until
Mm-hmm.
that's not done, they will keep producing histamine, and that's the reason why people have to be on histamine and Claritin for the rest of their life. Or whenever
Yeah.
the season actually changes, whenever there is too much of pollen, or whenever there is an trigger factor that comes into play, they
Mm-hmm.
actually seem to need it. So
Right.
I urge all of the listeners to really, really understand this aspect of it. Asthma, allergies, lymphatic issues, skin conditions are not conditions of those organs. They are conditions of your gut. And thank you for sharing that, Saraswati, because that's very helpful to know what had happened in his case and how it was like a process, right? We always draw a
Yeah.
timeline to see what had happened, and it always a
Right.
process. They get sick first because they're
Mm-hmm.
exposed to new things, but we don't know how to
Right.
tackle them. Then we give them antibiotics. Then after
Yeah.
that, they actually develop more infections, more
Mm-hmm.
antibiotics. After that, more infection, and not only infections, now it's like allergies
Right.
as well, and
Right.
asthma. And this just cycle goes on and on and on.
Right, absolutely. I do remember, I think one of the times when I mentioned antibiotic, you actually told me that it's like how when you set a wildfire in a forest, how
Mhm.
everything gets destroyed and how long does it take to come back into becoming green and forest again. That's
Mhm.
exactly what happens to the gut when you give an
Yes.
antibiotic. I mean, I have shared that with so many people
Yes.
in my life, just that, one analogy, because it gives them an idea of what exactly they're doing. I mean,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. And the thing is
hopefully
that
they took that.
yeah, I hope so too. And that's the
Yeah.
reason why, we
Yeah.
keep sharing these things. Most people
Hmm.
don't realize that because they're given antibiotics so easily. And even many of my
Right.
patients, despite being treated, despite being,
Hmm.
educated on these things, they'll still go out and get an antibiotic because they don't even think twice about it. And I have
Right.
some patients from India, which is even worse.
Hmm.
They actually get antibiotics from India and keep it at home. And anytime
Right.
they actually notice any symptom, they don't even
Hmm.
actually go to the doctor or get a prescription. They just take the
They just,
antibiotic themselves.
yeah.
Without, I mean, the amount, and then we wonder why
Right.
we don't really have health anymore as much.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
And on
makes
top
total
of that,
sense.
another thing that also happens nowadays that I want to also mention is that there is so much of antibiotics in our water, the water that we drink,
Hmm.
and that's also the
Okay.
reason why we want to be drinking, reverse osmosis water or distilled water, even though that's not
Hmm.
ideal. Unfortunately, we don't have ideal life conditions. We have to do the best in
Right.
this condition. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I often tell people that you need to drink different water, water is so
Hmm.
medicinal sometimes, and it can be
Right.
therapeutic if we use the elements of the earth to give us.
Hmm.
But if we also use the
Right.
elements in the wrong way, then we would be using it in the wrong way. So we can get antibiotics from that source as well. And another aspect of it
Hmm.
that I want to point out is the chlorine and fluoride in the water, which also act as
Hmm.
antibiotics. Because you think about it, right? What does chlorine do in the pool? And that is
It
exactly
cleanses
the
the
reason.
water. Yeah.
Exactly. It kills
Right.
pathogens and keeps it to a lower level.
Everything.
And that's exactly what
Right.
happens in our water as well. Why do they add chlorine to our water? To be able to keep the pathogenic
Yeah.
load low so that it becomes potable.
Yeah.
So, but the problem with that is because
Hmm.
it is an antibiotic, it also kills the gut flora on a regular basis. And so that's also the reason why we have
Right.
to take probiotics so much these days. There are so
That
many
makes
sources
sense.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That
and
makes
then
total
what
sense.
happened with Sivansh?
So, I mean, I guess, I was looking for alternatives. And I mean, my dad, like I think I mentioned in the first podcast, he has been a homeopathic, and I have lived with homeopathic remedies for a while, for a long time, when I
Mhm.
was, with my parents, of course. So I was kind of thinking like there should be something in homeopathy, there's nothing that cannot be treated in that. I mean,
Right.
it's a wonderful medicine, or Ayurveda for that matter. So I was looking, I was like searching, and then I found your website.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh great, there is a homeopath here in Dallas. I've never known. I guess, in Bloomington I never found one even.
Ah.
So then I contacted you. I think I had a free consultation at that time. You offered free consultation, so I talked to you. And I think when I talked to
You're
you, I think my
creating
son
trouble,
actually
Saraswati, for me.
but not anymore. You are way too busy now. It's hard to get an appointment. So like within a month, or I guess sometimes I get lucky, which is great.
Yeah.
But you were just starting up, I guess, in Dallas.
Right.
Moved from Vegas at that time.
Right.
So um So I talked to you, and I think at that time my son was actually having like that. I think they said hand, foot, and mouth disease.
Uh-huh.
That's what they called it, because he had like little bumps on his hands
Right.
and feet, and I
Right.
think some in his mouth. And I
Mhm.
talked to you then, but I guess I was on my way to the pediatrician at that time, and you said, we can treat it, but I need to first see him, just
Mhm.
to be able to see what exactly is happening.
Right.
And I understand homeopathy where you actually look at the as a whole, with the
Right.
system as a whole, rather than just the symptoms.
Right.
So then I the pediatrician said it's viral, it'll probably go away. So I waited for it to go away, and then I took an appointment with you. I came and saw you, and then you said, well, the first thing we need to do is build his immune system.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing is, I mean, no matter what symptoms, allergies, and all of the problems that he has been facing, the first thing said is we need to build his immune system. So we
Mm-hmm.
put him, I think, for a year on like selenium and aloe vera juice and sovereign silver and all of those
Mm-hmm.
things. And I mean, I could see the progress as I was starting to give him that, within like a few months. I could see that. I mean, he was still getting allergies and, cold and all of that, but it wasn't severe, like where I had to actually rush to the urgent care or something, where he had to be given a breathing treatment. And you said, even with nebulizer I could use the sovereign silver instead of the
Mm-hmm.
albatrol, I think.
Mm-hmm.
See, I
Correct.
don't even remember names anymore,
Correct.
but I
Correct.
guess that's what the one. So instead of that, and I started doing that to him the moment I saw some
Mm-hmm.
cold or allergic thing. I would do that to him, and that would actually make him feel better. And I think within a year, I mean, I saw so much progress. It's like, I mean, he used to still get
Mm-hmm.
some sort of allergic reaction or something, but it wasn't like how he was before. And his
Right.
breathing, that improved so well. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
think he has a tongue tie, so he still kind of breathes with his mouth, but
Mm-hmm.
his nasal congestion and all of that heaviness in breath,
Mm-hmm.
that decreased to a great extent, like almost like 80% gone. And I mean, I was just amazed,
Yes, and
and I
there's
was like so happy, like,
yeah, there is another aspect to all of this. Unfortunately, in his case, he has the tongue tie, and I want to share this with our listeners as well. Is how the tongue tie, is something that you want to look out for in babies, and they used to customarily cut tongue tie off at birth for people. So the midwives used to deliver the baby, and they used to actually have on their left pinky finger the nail that used to be cleaned, and they used to just cut it, cut it, cut it. As the baby comes out, they'll just cut it, and then the baby will be washed and taken care of. So they used to do that customarily because a lot of children had tongue ties, and now we see a lot
tongue
of children
ties.
who have tongue ties as well. But most parents
Mhm.
don't know that, and they don't look for it until there is any kind of speech delay or speech issues, right? That's the only time when parents look at, oh, is something going on with the tongue? Is there something structural going on? But it's not just about speech alone. And in his case,
Right.
your son's case as well,
Yeah.
the tongue tie has contributed to his breathing issues as well.
Hmm.
And on top of it, him keeping his mouth open. And not only that, along with all of that, his tonsils got enlarged. And this is something
Right.
that a lot of people, a lot of children deal with. And when
Hmm.
tonsils get enlarged, they get strep throats often as well. And then they get more antibiotics. And then eventually,
Hmm.
until they have to get their tonsils and or adenoids removed. So in his
Right.
case, we found that too, right? For him, we
Yes.
found that his tonsils were enlarged when I was treating him,
Right.
to strengthen his immune system and to heal his
Hmm.
asthma. We also found
Hmm.
that he had tonsils enlarged. And
Enlarged.
the most
Right.
amazing part is that we were able to heal it without surgery, isn't it, Sarah?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the most incredible thing.
Yes. That we didn't
Yes.
need surgery. And I know that so many parents out there think that that is the only option. Like, if you didn't
Right.
do surgery, the tonsil will not be able to go back to normal size. I mean, it's like it just
Right.
became bigger and there's nothing else that can be done other than surgery. And
Right.
that wasn't the case with Sivansh. It did take
Yes.
a bit of time, but now his tonsils are completely, normal.
Yeah. Right.
So what's happening after that? I mean, did you get his tongue tie revised?
Not yet. So when I went to the dentist, that's when I kind of learned that he has a tongue tie,
Mm-hmm.
and and that's why his the mouth palate. I think the upper palate of his mouth is like a mountain, like it's higher, and
Mm-hmm.
which is what I guess you said is causing his adenoids to be
Right.
congested or
Yes.
like narrow, I
Yes.
believe. So his
Adenoids
breathing
were
was affected.
enlarged as well as the tonsils were enlarged, and because of that,
Okay,
the airway was very small.
very small.
And that happens with all of the kids who have tongue ties. And that also, what other thing that happens also with kids with tongue tie is
Mm-hmm.
that their teeth starts
Mm-hmm.
either overcrowding, or their lower
Right.
jaw especially doesn't grow, and he also
Right.
had to have
An
expanded
expander.
student, right?
Right.
So
Right.
listeners, if you have babies, if you have
Mm-hmm.
children that are young enough, look for tongue tie. There are holistic dentists that you can
Mm-hmm.
actually go to. Regular dentists probably won't do anything about it or say anything. There are some dentists that would,
Right.
but most dentists don't. So holistic
Right.
dentists do recognize that, and they'd be able to even do a tongue tie revision, or even at birth.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good idea to look for those things and check
Yes.
if it is there, to get it revised then and there itself, so that so many things that
Mm-hmm.
you'll deal with eventually can be prevented.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I used to go to a regular dentist, in the beginning for him, for like cleansing the teeth, cleaning and all of that. And I mean, nobody ever said anything to me. All they said was if they're too crowded, because they were pretty close and crowded.
Mm-hmm.
They said, as he starts losing teeth and getting his permanent teeth, we could do braces after he's done. I was like,
Right.
I mean, I didn't know better either at that time, right?
Right.
I think I had a conversation with you, and then when I went to another dentist, that's when they educated me about it. It's like, oh, so there are actually alternatives
Right.
to expanding the jaw and keeping it, healthier, rather than having braces where you wear a retainer all your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that there is nothing that is done about any of these things either. That,
Right.
this is, and again, I often tell my patients that, your teeth are a part of your body. They are not in another country.
Right.
So don't
Right.
treat it as if, it's, like, I mean, even if it is in another country, the soil is actually shared.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't really be
Right.
treating it that way anyways. Even the other countries
Right.
shouldn't be treating it that way. But
Right.
in our mouth, like, people go again and get fluoride
Mm-hmm.
in their teeth. And
Oh
what does
yeah.
fluoride do? Again, it's an biotic pretty much. It
Biotic.
kills
Right.
bacteria. But we also need good flora in our mouth. And not
Mm.
only that, most dentists, unfortunately, don't give us that as to what can you do to prevent something instead of
Mm-hmm.
just treating it, right? Whether it is cavity,
Right.
well, just brush your teeth, floss. Okay, that's not enough. There are more things that needs to be done to make sure that there are no cavities, especially if there's a
Mm-hmm.
family history or past history of cavities. And then on top of it,
Right.
you have overcrowding. What can you do ahead of time? Instead of looking at airway,
Right.
breathing, and so on and so forth, just saying, well,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there is
Right.
overcrowding. Once he has teeth, we'll put braces. It's just no way of
Exactly.
actually doing treatment.
Right. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I didn't know about fluoride until very recently, right? Like 3 to 4 years, because when I used to go to dentists, they would put the fluoride and then you swish it in the mouth and you throw it. I'm like, oh, that's healthy. I mean, it's like we just believe when we go to a
Right.
doctor, whatever they say, thing, because the expectation is that they know better
Right.
than us. I mean, that's the whole point, right? But then after I learned how all of these things affect, then I was like, what did I do to myself and to my kids all
Right.
these years? But I guess it was out of ignorance. It was not intentional. So
Right.
so now, because we know better, I try to do better and actually, consult you and, try to ask you is like, hey, what do I do in this certain situation? So definitely, it's a big change.
And also another thing to point out too is how fluoride and chlorine also affects iodine absorption or causes iodine depletion, contributing to
Mm-hmm.
hypothyroidism. I mean, literally,
Right.
it's like all the things that we have or seems to be
Yeah.
so common, allergies, seems to be
Right.
so common, hypothyroidism. All of these
Yeah.
things are so much interconnected, from the foods that
Right.
we eat, from the water that we drink, from going to the dentist for cleaning and
Yes.
trying to prevent using toothpaste that has fluoride, just
Fluoride. Yes.
everything
Yeah.
that we do thinking that we are going to prevent things causes the same problem
Right.
trying to prevent.
Exactly. And I think for me, the connection from like how the teeth are connected to internal like organs in the body, I think thermogram, I think was the biggest eye opener for me. Is like, oh
Yes.
wow, there is so much connection between teeth and the rest of the organs. I mean,
Yes.
no one ever speaks about that,
No.
honestly. I mean, I'm like, how are we not looking at a body holistically? That I think that was the biggest eye opener for me when I first did the thermogram. And ever since that, I literally fell in love with that test. I mean, it's like, I'm not going anywhere else. I'm not doing any other test unless you tell me to, but
Yes.
it's just a thermogram. It's such a holistic test.
Yes. And it really is a functional test too. It tells you even before you have
Right.
cavities. And that's the best part
Oh
about it. It
yeah.
tells you before you even have cavities, so you can actually prevent cavities.
Right.
I haven't yet
Prevent cavities.
seen
Yes.
anything that will do that, and
Right.
so I'm
Right.
definitely grateful that, that actually shows us that. Even when the dentist
Yes.
said there's nothing, I'm like, nope, there's something going on
There's
right
something.
there. So that specific gum line, there is gum
Right,
infection going on. Let's do something about it now so that you
right.
don't have to deal with cavities later. Yeah.
Right,
So,
right.
and tell me about how is it, for him now? How is his health now? And how do you do things differently? Like when was the last time he had to take an antibiotic, or when was the last time he had to use nebulizer? Is he still asthmatic? What is happening with his life?
So I have not used an antibiotic for neither of my kids or for myself. In general, in the family, there is no antibiotic concept at all in the last 6, 7 years. I guess since I saw you, whenever
Okay.
that was. So I have not given it. I mean, I think when I went to India, people have prescribed that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but the moment I go to India and they get sick, at least I know now when there's a food allergy, what to give them
Mm-hmm.
to kind of heal that.
So you
But when
become
I didn't know,
educated in taking care of them. And in the
correct.
last 6 years, you have
Yeah.
been able to, obviously, your kids are still kids, and obviously they still
Yes.
get sick sometimes. It's not like,
Right.
they don't get sick at all, but you have
Correct.
become empowered in a way that you don't really
Absolutely.
need to
Mm-hmm.
go and take antibiotics. So that's wonderful. I
Correct.
wanted to ask that specific question because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people cannot think that's possible. It's a paradigm
Absolutely.
shift that needs to
Oh
happen.
yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I mean, my first go-to is always homeopathic remedy,
Mm-hmm.
and I go into the Hygia app and look for those. If I'm confused as to what exactly to give, I look for those. If not, I send you an email,
Mm-hmm.
asking if it's like a complex situation, right, where there are like
Right.
10 things happening and I don't know which
Right.
remedy would calm them all down. That's when I send you an email and consult you for that. But usually, if it's like little ones like cough or something, based on whatever knowledge I've acquired from your trainings and your teachings, I just go to those, and based on that I kind of give the medication. Like recently my husband actually got COVID, and based on the cough symptoms that he had,
Mm-hmm.
I actually kind of gave him, like, I think kali bike or something like that, to kind of treat his phlegm, the mucus related cough and stuff, and it
Mm-hmm.
actually got better. So
Yes,
I feel like all your classes and the education that you have been like sharing with us, I think helped immensely, at least for me to grow into a holistic path.
that's wonderful. I mean, and so
Yeah.
he's not asthmatic anymore. He hasn't had
Nope.
to have any surgeries to remove his tonsils or
No.
adenoids. Perfect.
No. And I mean, he's having fantastic. I mean, he still gets like cold and sometimes a nasal congestion, and all of that. But now that I know what to give him, and how to treat that, I don't really take him to a doctor. I mean, like any other doctor besides you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there have been days where I've had to take him to like a pediatrician because he was running fever for a while, and I just didn't know what to give him and all of that. But it's only to know what is going on so that I can give the remedy.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it was strep, and sometimes I couldn't tell what it was, strep
Right,
or not, so I
right.
would take him just to get him tested, and then I
Mm-hmm.
give him the remedy coming back home, but not the antibiotic that they prescribed. I wouldn't go to Walgreens to pick that up at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think these happen when you are not in town and where you're not available, like over the weekends and things like that. And this was like what, maybe 2, 3 years ago, that I didn't know how to treat it. But now
Mm-hmm.
someone says throat pain, immediately the Hepar Self, and I go to Hepar Self and give them that,
Exactly.
and then like prevent even getting the fever stage, right? Like give the
Right.
body what it needs to heal without having to raise the temperature of the body.
Yes.
So
And even when it does raise the temperature of the body, that's a
right,
good thing because
good thing, right,
fever is for healing. The body is
for healing,
raising the temperature to kill the
right.
virus or the bacteria and to
Mm-hmm.
try and reduce it. So, do you give them Tylenol and ibuprofen to reduce
Nope.
fevers? You do not.
Not at all. Not at
Okay.
all. Yeah. I mean, usually my go-tos are like belladonna, aconite, or gelsemium based on the symptoms they have and what kind of fever they have. Sometimes I just give them vitamin C and D too. Unless, it's really bothering them, I don't try to give them anything.
Yes. So we
So
don't really need
yeah,
to treat the fever. We always treat
right.
the underlying problem. And that's again
Mm-hmm.
another important thing that I wanted to reiterate here is because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't necessarily think that, immediately we have been so conditioned to believe that fever is bad, right? The moment
Right.
the fever
Right.
happens, treat it, right? Stop the
Right.
fever, but then
Yeah.
prolong the illness, make the
Correct.
body not detoxify. So,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
again, here is an example for you, my audience, that if she can do it, you can do it. You know,
Absolutely.
if she has two kids and she's been able to not give them any antibiotics or any painkillers or any kind of fever reducers for 5 to 6 years, and the longer she has actually stayed away from it, the more she
Mm-hmm.
learns. and the better she's able to
Right.
apply herself and the knowledge that she has received to take care of her own family. And I
Yep.
see her kids less and less and less now. And that
That
is
is
the
very
goal of
true.
treatment, really, to be able
Yes.
to empower them so that you don't need to see them, after a point in time.
That is true.
Yeah. So, anything else that you want to share with our listeners today?
Not really. I think later on, I think there were some gut issues. I think you did kind of
Mhm,
address with him
mhm,
because he was very gassy and,
mhm.
I think, I mean, he had bowel movements, but then I think he was very gassy and, so I think we treated that as well.
Okay.
And
So,
I
when
mean,
do
it
we
was
usually treat this? This is important as well to notice is
Mhm.
this that we don't actually treat it once somebody has pain. We treat it when they are
Right.
gassy. We treat it when they're
Mhm.
constipated. We
Right.
actually fix it before it becomes a problem. And most
Mhm.
people are constipated or gassy and they don't even think twice about it. It's no big deal. They just live with
Right.
it, they deal with it. But you
Yeah.
shouldn't really deal with it. That's the language of your body.
Mhm.
It's trying to tell you. And as Saraswati is sharing, that when he was gassy, we
Right.
actually treated it because the gut needs cleansing from time to
Correct.
time. And if we
Correct.
don't do cleansing from time to time, sometimes life gets in the way and we
Mhm.
forget that we need to do it. It's been a few months and we haven't done anything. The body
Right.
tries to tell us by producing excessive gas or constipation.
Right. So, but I think other than that, I think since his immune system was, built up the 1 year, I think, all other problems that made him like to be called an asthmatic or any other respiratory issues that he has had, that never came up.
So, thank you so much, Saraswati, for coming in again today and sharing your story about your son and his healing journey and all the things that you have learned and how you are actually applying all the things that you have learned in your own life and your children's life. I love, love, love stories like this.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to be here and share my story and, my family story with you because hopefully it'll help a lot of people and have them change their path as well.
Yes, and that's exactly the reason why we do it. So, thank you
Mhm.
everyone for listening. I appreciate your time here with me. I know you have things to do and places to be. I love that you gave me this time to listen to me and Saraswati. So, I will catch you in 2 weeks with another healing story. And until then, you can share our stories with so many people who might benefit from it. Give us some love and follow us, subscribe to our channel so you can get updates and get notifications whenever a new episode comes up. And I will talk to you soon. Thank you.